But, Mr. Horowitz, you actually did make a finding on that very question, did you not? I direct you to page 14 of the executive summary, where you ascribe this to management and supervisory failures that were not specific to this case, but that were potentially endemic. Is that not correct?
I'm sorry, on the FISA side?
Yep, you say that so many basic and fundamental errors
Yes.
were made by three separate handpicked teams on one of the most sensitive FBI investigations, raises significant questions regarding the FBI chain of command's management and supervision of the FISA process. You then go on to describe it as a failure of managers and supervisors.
Right.
And you go on to say that your remedy is an OIG audit, not only of this case, but of other cases that have nothing to do with the Trump campaign, nothing to do with politics. So you actually do make a finding about this, and that is that you attribute the failure here to a failure of management and supervision that could well go beyond this particular case.
Correct, although not just managers and supervisors, obviously. All the line people who had responsibility, the prosecutors, they made very serious errors.
But you make no finding that this was attributable to a deep state conspiracy or a political conspiracy or any such type of motivation.
We make no finding. We explain in there that we did not have documentary or testimonial evidence that it was intentional. We also point out the lack of satisfactory explanations. And from there, I can't draw any further conclusions.
Correct. Other than you do, what you go with is that there was a failure of management and supervision over this complicated process that needs to be repaired.
From top to bottom.
Correct. Now, when did the Attorney General, what's the timeline on the Attorney General getting notice of this report? How long did it take between when he first saw this and when he credited this? He said that your investigation is a credit to the Department of Justice.
Well, we first provided the draft report for classification marking purposes right at the beginning of September, end of August, beginning of September.
So he and his team have had it for over a month, well over a month.
Yeah, and then we got it back from them with the markings. We did this normal process in a classified review. We then incorporated the markings, then produced it back in November for the factual accuracy.
And the director of the FBI would have had access to it during that time frame as well?
Same exact time frame.
Same exact time frame. And he complimented you on its thoroughness and professionalism and says that he accepts the report's findings, correct? With plenty of time to review it.
Correct.
Now, then we get to Mr. Durham. Did Mr. Durham have access to this report during that same period of time?
No, we did not give it to him in the end of August and September, precisely because it was for classification purposes. He had no reason to see it.
Yep.
We were very careful as to who could see it and who couldn't.
Yep.
We had the department keep lists of who could see it and who couldn't see it to control it.
He was not on the list?
He was not on the list. We provided to him in November.
Yep.
As part of our factual accuracy review.
November when, do you remember?
I could check, but it was probably roughly mid-November.
So, are you familiar with what he is undertaking at all?
I'm somewhat, but not. I wouldn't pretend to be completely familiar with it.
He notes that he does not agree with some of your report's conclusions as to predication and how the FBI case was opened. What information do you think he has access to that you did not have access to?
I have no idea.
When you look at Director Wray's letter, he says that his organization, the FBI, provided broad and timely access to all information requested by the OIG, including highly classified and sensitive material. And he accepts that the Crossfire Hurricane investigation was done for an authorized purpose and with adequate factual predication. I'm trying to figure out where the world of evidence exists about predication that you didn't have access to and that FBI Director Wray would not have access to. Where could John Durham be going for information that is outside of the scope of what you have access to or what FBI Director Wray has access to?
I don't know, and you'd have to ask the Attorney General or Mr. Durham.
I mean, hypothetically, is there some area of evidence that you're aware of that you didn't get access to?
We are not. We got 1 million records. We asked the FBI for all of the materials in their possession, including from other agencies.
Does he have
Information
a
will be in
grand
their
jury
possession.
operating, do you know?
I have no idea, and I couldn't say if I knew.
Is he going overseas to debrief foreign agents and interests?
I have no idea. You'd have to talk with him.
Okay. Predication involves a threshold, does it not?
Correct, for opening an investigation.
Yeah. And when you've hit your predication threshold, more evidence doesn't, as long as the evidence is adequate, more evidence doesn't take it away, correct?
Correct.
So I'm also trying to figure out how it is that even if he had more evidence that you did not have, that takes away from your conclusion that predication was adequate.
Again, I think you'd have to ask him or the Attorney General.
You can't think of a way to get there, can you?
I don't know. As I said earlier, we stand by our findings.
So you describe serious performance failures in the FISA process. Those are likely to lead to either disciplinary actions or to sanctions by the court, or at least be considered for those things, correct?
Those are certainly two of the options, yes.
Yes. And in that process, those individuals will have a chance to defend themselves. There's due process involved.
We are not the adjudicators. That goes to the department, the court, or any other entities that might.
So we may find out more as those processes go forward in that context.
Correct, you might.
Okay. Now let's look at the intelligence briefing. At the time of that intelligence briefing, what did the FBI know about how far Russian interests had penetrated into the Trump campaign?
I don't know, as I sit here, the level and extent of the FBI's knowledge. We were looking at the origins of the Crossfire Hurricane investigation in these 4 cases.
But the FBI clearly knew that there was an investigation going on because it was their investigation.
Yes, and we lay out here some of what they knew. I just
They
can't
knew
sit
the
here and tell you
concerns
other
about
than
Carter
what's in-
Page, correct?
I'm
And
sorry?
they knew the concerns about
Correct.
Carter Page, and he was associated with the Trump campaign.
Correct,
They knew, they had an investigation going on into Michael Flynn at the time.
correct.
Do you know if they knew about the Trump Tower meeting 2 months before the intelligence briefing with the
I don't
Russian
know.
agents?
I don't know one way or the other.
Okay. And going into it, it would be reasonable, wouldn't it, to expect that the FBI did not then know how far Russian penetration into the Trump campaign went?
I have no idea at what stage their investigation was at that point in time. I have no reason to doubt what you're saying, but I don't know independently.
So there was no way that they could rule out that people present at the intelligence briefing on behalf of the Trump campaign might have actually been involved in the Russian operation.
I have no knowledge of that. All I know as to that is they had the open investigation on Mr. Flynn.
Yeah. So they certainly couldn't rule out when he was actually in that briefing that
As
he
I
was a
said,
potential participant in
Right.
the matter that they were looking into.
yeah, and as I said, Senator, Crossfire Hurricane was bigger than just the pieces we were looking at, so
Yep.
I can't sit here and tell you what else the FBI may or may not have known at the time.
So while we can agree that putting Crossfire Hurricane agent into the intelligence briefing of the Trump campaign might have been over-aggressive, for the FBI to be in that intelligence briefing would be perfectly appropriate, correct?
In fact, absolutely appropriate for them to be there. That was the debate that went on internally at the FBI, which is what to do, and they never, which they did not discuss either with anyone at the department, the appropriateness of it, or at ODNI. It was the DNI's.
But there was no reason the
Briefing.
FBI shouldn't have been in that briefing.
The FBI should have been at that briefing
Precisely.
for intelligence purposes.
For intelligence purposes.
Give an intelligence
and-
briefing.
And it also would have been perfectly appropriate for a Crossfire Hurricane agent to have debriefed the FBI agent present at the intelligence briefing to see if Michael Flynn had said anything relevant to the investigation, or anybody else for that matter. It was information potentially relevant to the investigation, was it not?
Depending what occurred there, you could foresee a hypothetical where that occurred. I think it raises serious policy questions that, frankly, the FBI director needs to sort through and understand with leadership at the department, because that briefing and those briefings are for purposes of protecting campaigns and to allow transitions to occur.
And it was an
effectively.
unusual circumstance.
And-
A participant in that briefing on the part of the Trump campaign was the subject of an FBI investigation.
That is correct, but it raises not
I agree with you. There are
significant
plenty of
policy
issues.
questions.
But
There-
we should not draw the conclusion that there's no way the FBI should ever be given access to evidence that arises in the context of an intelligence briefing related to counterintelligence.
And that'll be up to Director Wray as in responding to our recommendation to
Great.
sort through that
Time
policy
has
question.
expired, and thank you.